So we want to have an overview and a little bit of an introduction to programming. So there's no requirement for you ever to have done programming to do this, and hopefully if you've never done it, you might gain a little bit of an understanding, or it's a nice kind of crash course almost, very very light introduction into the general idea of programming, most programming, and particularly in within Unity. So we're going to start off really with what programming is, and it's kind of problem solving. We have problems, and we're going to have to come up with solutions, and those solutions are then written in a programming language. And of course, there are loads of different programming languages, and then those programming languages will have frameworks and libraries, so pre-written code that we're able to build our code in on top of. So we're kind of developing software, on the shoulders of other people. That gives us just great start. So Unity to be an example of this. Unity is a tool that provides a load of different programming features that to access different parts of the engine, and we're able to build our games in on top of it. So if we're not talking about programming languages whatsoever, we want to talk really about the concept of object-oriented programming. So this is what C# is. It's the object-oriented language, which is what Unity uses. Unreal uses C++, which is also an object-oriented language, and you'll find the other game engines, and a lot of the programming you'll come across will be object-oriented. So in an object-oriented programming language, we are basically trying to map a model, so create a model of a problem, and try and get the relationships and the data and the actions of all these kind of objects that are contained in that model. We're trying to define those as the problem that we're going to actually, replicate here. So an example is we're just going to say, right, we're going to have a piece of software we're going to have a game that's going to include animals, so cats and dogs. That's it. So when I'm starting off, we go, right, well, maybe I need to have some information about what a cat is going to be, because I'm going to have loads at the minute. So what I might come in first, and I would say, right, well, for my cat, I'm going to need some data about it. Maybe it's weight, maybe it's breed, maybe it's location, and maybe something like its color. The cat then, all right, we're going to consider this maybe to be its data, information that each cat stores, but it's all common between all of the cats. We then may also have some actions that it's able to do. Maybe it's going to be able to jump, run, meow, maybe sleep, and just to finish it off, we'll put in eat then as well. So these might be actions that our cat is capable of doing, and all cats that will be in our game would also be capable of doing these. So when somebody jots all this stuff down, that's absolutely fantastic. We're now then going to go into like a programming language, and we're going to see how we would actually map this on for us. So in a programming language, we would create objects like the cat here using what's known as a class. And you can kind of think about it really as just a text file that contains information that you want to be compiled and then used within an application. So for instance, we are going to have data stored in here. Just like we have over there, we're going to have data, these little bits of information about the cat. And this data will be stored as what's known as variables. And just to know, variables have different data types. So depending on what information you're trying to store, you would pick a suitable data type for it. So we have data, which is stored in variables. These variables have different types, so numbers, words, references to other cats, this kind of thing. Our actions then will be known as methods or functions, depending on the language that you're using. So a function will basically define, well, how do I jump in relation to the tools that we're using. So in Unity, we have physics, so we're able to use that rigid body that we did in day one, and we're going to actually use that guy to jump. We can have run, so there might be, there's actually quite a bit involved with running. We have to move in a direction. We might have to play animations for our meow. We have to play a sound effect and that kind of stuff. So we can have loads of different bits here. And we can have some of these that are public, so people can see them outside of it, or we might have ones that are private, so that they're hidden from us. There are ones that are built in. So in Unity, if we're building a cat, we're going to have to build it on top of one of the built-in types that Unity provides us, and that is called a mono behavior. And I'm going to see that once we get into Unity. So it'll have some built-in stuff for us. So it'll have like a start action. It'll have an update. It has loads more that we're also going to see. But those are kind of the idea. So we're going to come up with some ideas for our actual objects in our game, try and figure out, hey, what's the data? What information do I need to store here? What are the actions this guy's going to have to do? And then go over and just take that into code and go, right, well, for every object that I'm going to have, I'm going to need a class for it. In that class, I'm going to have to store some data. So what are my variables? What are my data types for those variables? What are the actions I want this object to be able to perform? So what kind of methods and functions are going to be kind of required there? And just to note, like we'll start off with a cat, but as you kind of move into it, you'll probably quickly realize, particularly in games, that things might change a little bit. You might have to add some more bits and pieces in. So you never know. Later on, you might then end up with a actual dog. So I'm going to have a class. It might be called dog. It might have some similar stuff to the cat there. So we'll just say data, okay? But it could also have an action or a method here. That could be something like chase cat. So in that instance, we would then have to figure out, okay, what's required to chase the cat? Well, one, something in here would maybe have to find a cat first. So you might have a method to find a cat. Maybe you'd use the location here to find out who's the closest cat to it. Find the closest cat and then use that inside in this one here to actually go move towards that cat. And then more relationships can kind of build in the top of it. Maybe the dog is hungry, he has to go eat some food. There's loads of stuff he can keep on going with. The idea here in our programming is that we're going to have classes that have data stored in variables, and then we're going to have actions that are going to be performed. Everything else that is done inside those methods is kind of dependent on what you're using. So we're going to be using Unity. So a lot of the stuff we're going to see here is specific to Unity. You won't be able to take it over into like a web programming project and continue on with it there or anything. Okay, so hopefully that is a little brief or nice brief introduction into the idea of object-oriented programming, classes, the data, stored in variables,